So how's it going, Westworld fans? Westworld Season 3 Episode 1 has finally come to our screens, and that first episode was quite the ride. I mean, it set up so many things to look forward to this season from our favorite characters, whether that's Bernard or Dolores, or even some new and fascinating characters such as Caleb, played by the fantastic addition of Aaron Paul this season. So of course, guys, we have a lot to talk about in episode 1, so today I'm going to break it down because there were also, of course, this is Westworld, quite a few ambiguous aspects to this episode that have already got my mind ticking away as to what they could mean moving forward. So let's get right into episode 1, everyone. Just to let you know, if you're brand new to this channel, I will be doing reviews and breakdowns all season long. I don't have a huge Westworld audience, but I am very passionate about this show, so I hope you enjoy these breakdowns and reviews. So subscribe if you want to see more of them. But episode 1 picks up, of course, with the aftermath of season 2, which I believe is around 92 days later, with the world now knowing that there was a bloodbath at Delos Parks in where 75 people were killed and over 200 wounded in a multiple day massacre at the Westworld theme park, of course, which, Bernard in this episode is actually on the run and being primarily blamed for. Now, straight away in this episode, I just really liked how we got to see what the real world is like. I mean, we have been teased with it before in prior seasons, but not to the extent of where I'd say probably 70% of this show will be set in the actual outside world. Now, this was shown through that opening scene with Reed Phillips, who seems to have an invested interest in Delos and Insight, going around his luxurious home. We get to see his house AI, this kind of technological tablet as well that he ingests that I believe sets him off into a sleep that allows him to dream of sunsets. It just basically, throughout this episode in multiple aspects, shows humanity's kind of reliance upon technology. But this guy we're seeing in this moment of the episode, we come to learn actually even has a history with Dolores and was apparently a part of the band of people who went after her, I believe, in episode 1 from that quick flashback that displayed on screen when she was actually telling him about it. This opening moment of the episode gives you a really good impression of the conviction that Dolores has and just determination, if you will, that she takes in her stride in this real world. I mean, I even like how she was just even swimming in the pool, saying how she's never even really been in one before. She's very much so taking in this world as much as she is going round, putting on a front to everyone as if she's been there this whole time. Dolores also seems to know everything about this guy, and she actually said that through how she's read his book, describing it as this unauthorized autobiography, of which she was referring to that whole data mining aspect that Delos's theme parks were building on guests, of which kind of came out as this profile and base code of a human's mind, which nicely fits into her next line to him, which was that she's hurt so many people and she doesn't want to hurt anyone else unless they hurt me, which you sadly will. So she knew that no matter what, in those moments he would try to kill her, as he had done with his ex-wife, which did play out in a very ironic ending for him. Now, ultimately, all of this was to get all of his money to kind of set up a bit of a foundation for her plans and knowledge on Insight to help her, just as I said, kind of go about her plan for the host revolution. But this is when we're introduced to Aaron Paul's character, Caleb. Now, his character this episode was really about showing the state of the real world from the most, what I would say, clear perspective, not one shrouded in luxury like Reed Phillips' character we were just talking about, but one of who appears to have served in the military at one point and kind of has trouble adjusting to the way the world operates and the system, with all of the supposed advantages that technology allows everyone to have, yet for him, he feels quite the opposite. Now, of course, we did get quite a sense of this from the trailers, because a lot of, his character surrounded teases just like this, but in this episode, it really emphasized it to us in many different ways, and I really like the way this story unfolds to the audience, and that was with his best friend Francis ringing him periodically throughout the episode. You don't quite know who he is until the near ending of the episode, but Caleb's conversations with him kind of highlight his thoughts and feelings and practically display his therapy on how he is coping with daily life. He also even has get this implant turned off that everyone usually kind of has turned on, saying how some people need it, but for me, it's the rough edges I'm only hanging on to. We also get to see a bit more about his life with how his mother is in hospital, and we even see her taking that same kind of medical technological tablet that likely induces some pain relief and relaxing dreamlike state. So it seems that she could be suffering from dementia, as she doesn't even recognize who he is. The bills he has to pay on top of those medical treatments for her are really dragging him under, which kind of allows us to see the lengths he goes to try and make some money through that app that basically connects people to do questionable, dodgy jobs to get a bit of cash on the side. Now, this kind of ranges from really low-level things to more dangerous and risky criminal activities. I guess it's the more risk, the more reward, I suppose, but it kind of seems to be the only thing keeping him afloat. So we get to see him actually accept a job, which I thought was really cool, with a couple of other people who are trying to get by, making a bit of extra money, even speaking of like their rating on the app and how they're going to want to improve it, and commenting on Caleb's rating. And they all go and actually break into an ATM, which made him around $1,200 off of that single job. So it's quite tempting, I guess, for some people who are really struggling to do that all of the time. But let's visit Charlotte Hale's part of this episode, of which we still don't know which host control unit is really inside that host body, but I actually loved seeing scenes like this in the episode because it's quite literally host infiltration at the highest level, because, you know, we got to see a meeting with the board of Delos, I believe, which, you know, totally makes sense because this surrounds the discussion of them saying that the brand has been massacred due to what happened at Westworld last season. Now, this is when Charlotte straight up mutes that guy who is freaking out about the state of things. I mean, did this episode give off to anyone else like various Black Mirror kind of elements with what you could do in modern day technology, just through muting people and stuff like that? But either way, she insists that host production continues and that they will eventually recover their brand. And of course, we know that she wants host production to continue, so eventually they can kind of amass this army of hosts to have this uprising. But it's also very interesting that she has this CEO control to make decisions due to the machine, or this AI, having the shareholders proxy, which ultimately gave the approval for her to have that final say. However, what we do know from the trailers for season 3 is that it's teased that things will get very rocky for Charlotte, and it does seem that she does get found out, I guess, fairly soon, maybe episode 2, maybe episode 3. Perhaps we'll see Vincent Cassel's character question her decisions in the boardroom this episode, and maybe that somehow leads to her getting exposed. But either way, I'm just looking forward to everyone's reactions when they realize that they have literally had hosts, or have a host from a theme park in their own boardroom meetings, making decisions at the highest level. Now, next up, let's talk about how Jeffrey Wright's Bernard is handling things after being brought back by Dolores at the very tail end of last season. Now, he is living under the alias of Armand Delgado, which weirdly enough, you can change those letters around into Arnold Damaged, or Damaged Arnold, but that is just honestly me looking too far into things. But Bernard, yeah, he's laying very low, working at this meat processing place, and we get to see him looking at stories of how he's a very wanted man after the massacre at the Westworld theme park. I thought it was super interesting how they were going off this kind of dual personality mode for him this season, and he was even questioning himself in that one scene in the 342nd time that he's done a self-diagnostic, just checking for any tampering with his own code, or if there's been any contact with Dolores that he's unaware of which was apparently 92 days ago from those final scenes at the end of Westworld Season 2, and ultimately checking and even asking himself if he would actually lie to himself. So I think what ultimately is going on here is that Bernard is just really struggling to understand why Dolores would do what she did at the end of last season, kind of letting him go about his own free will and questioning if she has a grander plan for him, and is paranoid to the extent of that she may have already been up to some things with his code maybe. And we know that one of his goals this season is to stop her from obtaining her final goal, and I like how they decided to convey that in this episode through those co-workers. They were trying to hurt him because they realized who he was and on the run, and just before he presses that button to bring about his more host-centric self, he even tries to warn these people about Dolores by saying that somebody bad is coming for them and that he's trying to stop that. And he doesn't even want to hurt these people, and is just really trying to convince them that he's this good guy and there's somebody much worse out there you should be worrying about. But another interesting aspect of this though is that he does call this other version of himself in that diagnostic diagnostic test, Bernard. So does this mean that the dominant state of him is that reinvented Arnold, and when he presses that button, that's when he becomes Bernard? I mean, when he was asking himself those questions about tampering, he was asking if Bernard would ever lie to him, but ultimately for this episode, he does set off to go back to Westworld, which should set up some very interesting things to come. I believe this is where he'll run into Ashley Stubbs. Now, if you guys remember, he was revealed to be a host at the end of last season as well, so I think this is where, from the trailers, if I remember correctly, they're trying to find somebody to help stop Dolores. So there's quite a bit of things that Bernard will be up to in the Westworld Park, and I believe that will lead them to that kind of underground section where they retire a bunch of hosts. Now, revisiting Dolores this episode, this is where we see her in London, and she's meeting this man that she's been manipulating and taking advantage of to get some knowledge into inside for quite a few months now, known as Liam Dempsey, Technologist of the Year. Now, he is apparently the son of a man who is described as saving the world through algorithms. Later on in this episode, when they're in LA, we get to see him describe this huge device known as Rehoboam, in which it took his father 15 years to build it. He also has somewhat of a security detail, or as Tommy Flanagan's character Connells describes it, he safeguards the fortunes of his father's company for 20 years, and he plays quite an interesting part to this episode a little bit later. But it also seems that Rehoboam is this huge AI processing unit that essentially makes the world what it is today, and it's also kind of transcended technological prowess so much that they even kind of stopped being able to track its processing, or as Liam described it initially, as thoughts. It's so powerful that when Dolores was trying to find out who the system's original architect was, Liam said that if he told her who it was, that he would know already. The system would have told them, and he'd already be dead like his dad. So this system would almost know about him making the decision to tell Dolores about all of that before he even would. So, I think we can all tell that Rehoboam, or however you say it, will be critical to this season and Dolores' plan. Now, Dolores has already been trying to gain access to it, which almost got Liam Dempsey in trouble with his partners, of who I think are from Delos in this scene. I mean, there was a point in the episode where he met with that woman named Martell, who was actually Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy, you may have recognized. They were questioning if somebody on his side was trying to gain access to Rehoboam, of which little did he know that it was actually Dolores the whole time. And from their side, they were kind of worried that he was using Rehoboam, this, kind of godly machine, to spy on their activity. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but there was also a lot of talk about he in this episode, which I just found very intriguing. I don't know if any of you were thinking the same thing, like, who is this he? Of which, I could believe they were referring to maybe Vincent Cassell's character, who could be the Zurak character that Connell's character later on reveals to Dolores being the original architect, that is, before dying and being replaced by a host that looks exactly like him, which, we'll get onto in a little bit. But I'm looking forward to seeing this presence of who this he is, and how he plays into this whole grand plan, and if it is Vincent Cassell's character. But that whole latter part of this episode is where things really stepped up, and this is where Liam revealed that he actually didn't have control of Rehoboam, only the outer layers, and after Liam's father died, his father's partner locked him out of the system. And is it just me, or does Liam, albeit that he has this kind of longer hair, but just kind of look like a younger William? I mean, I don't actually think necessarily that William necessarily had another child, but there's just like a lot of ambiguity surrounding he and Liam's father, who is apparently dead at this point, or assumed to be dead or whatever. But there's a whole bunch of rabbit holes we can go down there, and we know that William went in deep with the whole root of the park data collecting thing, so I don't know, just something to think about there. Now, this is where Dolores gets compromised, and she kind of goes along with getting taken because this would ultimately pan out to serve her better than what it seemed like at this moment in time to the audience, because it looked like she was in some real trouble and that she was kind of caught red-handed. Now, this brings me back to Caleb. Throughout the episode, we get a bit of a better idea of what Caleb is dealing with. It becomes apparent by the end of the episode that Francis is like his best friend, and through very quick flashbacks, it seems that they served together together, and it kind of showed a specific mission of where he got fatally injured, which kind of meant and turned out that the cause this whole time was just this subscription service that Caleb had signed up to try and have some thread of meaning to hold on to in this very lonely existence of his, of which, we all know how he feels about this real world where he doesn't really fit in. Now, that moment when Caleb was breaking it down after not being able to deal with the fake AI version of his best friend really personified the reality of life outside the parks, in how the system just didn't care about anyone, didn't really give a crap if you lived or died, is what really began to pave his way to Dolores, in where he wants to forge a relationship to move onward with something or someone, that's real. But, the irony of that is that Dolores is a host, well, albeit that you could argue that she is also real, given the whole revelation of hosts that are now awake. But it kind of goes without saying that it will be so interesting to see if this will just kind of purely be a manipulation on Dolores' side, or will she actually gain some humanity back when getting to know the value of human life when meeting Caleb, who isn't exactly as careless as almost every other human she's ever met. I mean, I can understand how Dolores got to the point she's at, despite how ruthless she is now, and I just can't wait for that exploration of everything like that this season. Not to mention the revelation of when Caleb finds out that she's just kind of this host, albeit kind of sentient. There's going to be a lot to unpack down the road. And the ending of this episode was just fantastic, with Dolores fighting back ruthlessly against Connells and his men. She revealed yet again that he was another character who they've met once before, just like that guy at the beginning they've met before in the park. And that's not all too surprising, considering, Dolores was playing that same storyline out all the time when he was on vacation, which just also kind of makes me think maybe a bit too deep down the rabbit hole. Out of the many flashbacks we've seen throughout the seasons of Dolores in host mode with William, or even in the events of the real world, or even within Westworld, could we have seen who he was, or at least with, or who was meant to be with, around 20 years ago before, considering that he's been looking after the fortunes of Liam Dempsey's father's company for 20 years? I mean, anyway, after one of his final words to Dolores being that she'll never get close to Liam, not now, it's actually quite the opposite. She quite literally has a copy host of him who will be able to infiltrate inside and be close to Liam this whole time, allowing Dolores much more information than which she's ever had before. Also, I love that final line from the host Connells to the real Connells, in how he mirrors what he said to Dolores when he was trying to get her to OD in the car, in where he said, "Don't worry, can't imagine anyone will miss you." Well, that was delivered right back at him. And this is when Caleb hears all of that gunfire after severing his kind of last connection to his best friend, or former kind of best friend Francis, and letting go to find someone new. And lo and behold, just like what we saw in all those trailers, he finds Dolores. And we also got that little tease or post-credit tease of Maeve in that somewhat like Reichwoldy kind of part, so there will be some park stuff in this season, of course, but we all know that Maeve meets Vincent Cassell's character and she goes after Dolores from the teasers of the trailers. But honestly, guys, in all of this breakdown I've done, I'm really impressed with this first episode. It's got me intrigued as quite a diehard Westworld fan. I really do feel like it did a good job. It's a completely different setting for this season. We're outside Westworld. We'll still be revisiting it and other parks in a way, but I truly felt like the story has been set up so interestingly. The premise alone, of course, of Dolores and hosts trying to take over in the real world is just, it kind of goes without saying that you've got me sold already. And there's already, mystery, ambiguity, like not as much as what some people view as the overcomplicated past seasons, or, especially season 2 for some, but there's enough there that's not mega complicated, but definitely has us wondering who is in Charlotte Hale's body still, who is the new host in Connell's character. There's a whole bunch going on, and the performances from Aaron Paul was fantastic. Evan Rachel Wood just dominates every scene that she's in on the screen. Like, I really just do love her portrayal in Westworld, each and every side that we've seen, and I just can't wait for her and Caleb to connect. I can't wait to see Aaron Paul and Evan Rachel Wood's chemistry, and we've still got so much more to come from William, the man in black, if you will, the whole future segment to that. I could go on forever, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below, guys, all of your theories. But if you enjoyed this review and breakdown, why not subscribe? Seriously, I'll be doing this every week. I would love to get some of your input on it and feedback, and also if you did like this video, leave a like on it. But other than that, everyone, I would just like to say thank you so much for spending some of your time on this long breakdown with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you Westworld fans in the next video. Goodbye.